From cries of fake news to maligning the mainstream media, a look at why trust in journalism is so low and what can be done to restore it. Plus, how our unusual present circumstances will shape our future habits. Ford's chief futurist shares her predictions. Today is Sunday, December 27, 2020, and this is Flashpoint. Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I hope your Christmas was wonderful. And now we make the turn to the new year. Most everyone I know is eager to smack 2020 on the rump and send it on its way. Maybe sock it in the nose, a better way to put it. I fear 2021 might not realize it's supposed to be a new start, but here's hoping we can convince it of that. What will the new year bring us? 2020 was such a wild turn from where we thought we were headed. But how much of it was just a detour, and how much of it was a complete change of destination? Ahead this morning, we're going to talk with someone whose career is all about peering into the future and figuring out what the trends are and how they manifest themselves in our behaviors and our priorities. Cheryl Conley is the chief futurist for Ford Motor Company, and we'll pour over her new findings a little later on. But up first, the next round of what has become a continuing conversation on Flashpoint. The new year brings us a very big change in Washington, but the election, and for that matter, the last several years, have left us with a very divided America, and those Americas are increasingly relying on their own channels of information. Can American journalism use this transition to regain its footing? Or is the role of a traditionally neutral journalist gone for good? We'll set up a checkpoint for reporters and editors this morning. Is there any way for the press to reclaim the high ground? Or is it possible that we already have it, no matter what the detractors say? We'll walk our way into 2021. Up first today on Flashpoint. Well, we've done quite a bit of soul searching for the American press on this program over the years, and in particular over the last 4. And now with the calendar turning to a new year in a matter of about 3 weeks, a new administration taking over, I think a good time to talk about this component of American society that our founding fathers understood to be a critical part of a functioning democracy, but one that many Americans feel has let them down. Let's talk about the fix for that with Chastity Pratt, who is the Education Bureau Chief for the Wall Street Journal, Nancy Kaffer, columnist for the Detroit Free Press, Gary Miles is with us, the editor and publisher of the Detroit News, and on the upper left there, Guy Gordon, who hosts the Guy Gordon Show on WJR, but my former colleague here at Local 4 and a guy that Guy and I have talked a ton over the years about journalism. And so, Guy, let me talk to you first. Having left a sort of mainstream television, if you will, and gone to a radio station where a lot of your listeners are conservative voters. I'm really curious as to whether you think we've got a chance to get those folks back to traditional journalism, or after the last 4 years, have we lost them forever?
Well, first of all, we should point out that just because we're having this conversation is a good thing. It means we're not in denial about the fact that we need to be a little bit more self-aware and reflective of where we are at this moment, as you pointed out, Devin. I got to tell you, I mean, when I started in 2017, coming in with a reputation, I think, for fairness, it wasn't exactly appreciated. I mean, 8 in 10 people right now feel that the media is biased and that it's getting worse, and that when we hold public officials accountable, we don't do it in an even-handed manner, and that even our inaccuracies are intentional. That, too, is 8 in 10, according to a new Knight Foundation survey. So it's real. It's pervasive. And now you see, and you and I have been talking about this, the defection of Fox viewers to OAN and Newsmax because they feel that Fox is no longer pro-Trump enough. And we're seeing that on the progressive side, too, the abandonment of what they thought were their media sources. So we're not only putting ourselves in silos, the silos are getting smaller, and in some cases, we're seeking misinformation, not just what we consider to be friendlier information.
You know, Chastity, the rise of those two stations that Guy just mentioned, Newsmax and OAN, I find deeply depressing. And they often trade in conspiracy theory and a lot of dishonesty, I feel. I think many journalists feel that way. And I guess the question becomes, do I need to try to get those people back? Should I be reaching out to them, or is that just how it's going to be and that's kind of a lost cause? What do you think, Chastity?
What I think, Devin, is that, Guy is right. It's really important that we reflect on what we're doing and whether we're doing it right. Our job as journalists is accuracy and fairness. And I think that we're at a space right now where we shouldn't only reflect on what we do and how we do it, but we need to educate people about what the media really is. Because let's be honest, the fact that you have all these new news organizations calling themselves news organizations when they're really just peddling propaganda, people don't know the difference. So it's up to us to consistently and constantly do media literacy to help people understand there are journalists like ourselves who do the news, and then there are those who just spout off their opinions and conspiracy theories, and they should not ever, ever, ever be put in the same category as us, traditional media news organizations. So I think that's the real key here. We're going to see these groups come and go, these different news organizations, bloggers, personalities, what have you. People need media literacy to know the difference between news and propaganda. Yeah. And from there, we can address all the other issues, the conspiracy theories, whatever. People just need to get straight on what's news.
Gary, do you find yourself wanting the paper to adjust and to change with the kinds of things that Chastity's just talking about? Or do we, those of us who still expect that journalism can remain kind of a neutral force, and I'm not talking about your editorial page, obviously, which has a voice, but do we just have to kind of stay the course and say, no, this is what we do. This is who we are and who we've always been, and we got to keep doing what we do?
Well, certainly, I think the prudent course for the impartial media, as I like to think of us, is to stay the course, to stay impartial, recognizing that there will be a rise in partisan and, as Chastity put it, outlets that will seek to kind of purvey a point of view, and we've seen that already. And going also to Chastity's point, I think we see that this definition of media is so loose that I don't even like us to use it anymore. I mean, what are we talking about when we say the media? Some of the people who will criticize the media will be talking about OAN or Newsmax, even though you or I wouldn't put them in the traditional media. So when you include everybody who has a public voice, then there's going to be distrust. I mean, it was just a couple of months ago that Tucker Carlson's attorneys were arguing in defense of a libel suit that he should not, that in no way do his readers expect him to be telling the truth. Yeah. He's giving a point of view. Yeah. And, that's what, going to literacy, I think that's an important point, as well as this watering down of the definition of media. So absolutely, I think for the impartial media, we're trusted voices. And I think what's often lost in this debate is that readership in traditional media has been growing. So yes, there are other outlets that are sprouting too. But readership in the Detroit News has seen incredible growth over the last 2 years, in part, I'm sure, because we are an impartial and a source that seeks to tell the truth.
It's so funny, Nancy. I hate to feel so stodgy when people ask me about where should I be getting my news. I tend to, send them to the old reliables. That's not to say that there's not a lot of good journalism being done in new places. But I'm really confused about how we all move forward if we still believe in, and I've always told people that my job, for instance, on this program is to be an energetic Switzerland. If I still believe in the idea of a neutral journalist, I am under assault from a lot of different places, of course, but what I really don't know how to do is how to be a journalist in a post-truth world, Nancy, if the truth really is so now up for debate, and we have people talking about, as Kellyanne Conway famously said, alternative facts. I don't really know how to exist in that world.
I think that this last 4 years, and especially this election cycle, is a situation that none of our years in journalism have prepared us for. When you have people who lie all the time, people who are saying untruths that all of our outlets have debunked repeatedly about the election and what happened. And when people just don't want to hear that, what do you do? I mean, if I knew, I would be doing it. I will also say that, I'm an opinion writer, but I tell the truth. I don't think that having writing an opinion column means I get to lie. I tell you my angle or my slant or my interpretation or analysis of the truth, but I don't lie in my columns. And I think that's one of the distinctions that Chastity was talking about with the propaganda versus traditional media. I think people still really want reliable information. Early in the pandemic, and I never checked back in on this, but we saw people search traffic for information about coronavirus, starting off as COVID-19, coronavirus, pandemic, all this stuff. But then we saw a rise in search traffic for COVID-19 FREEP. It was specifically people looking to the free press for information. And Gary, you guys probably saw the same thing at the news, because they, I think what that meant is that they knew we were a trusted source and that they were going to get the right, accurate information from us. And so there is still that appetite for news that has this name that is going to be bringing true information to you. And when we make a mistake, which we do, we correct it publicly, which is a big thing that we do. That part of that media literacy is that people, if they're trying to evaluate a news site, they should look for how they correct their mistakes, because we correct our mistakes in public. So that there is still that appetite, but then what do you do when the appetite among some is for a truth they want to hear? I think
it's a really important point. I point that out all the time, that when a newspaper or a television station makes a mistake, we retract it, correct it, sometimes apologize for it. We don't get that out of the White House when things for the last couple of years have been proven to be false. But Guy, for the last month and a half, almost every day you get callers still who want to debate election fraud with you, and that's different from as we were just, I think all four of you have said now, that's a different thing, lying versus somebody's opinion. If you wanted President Trump to win the election or you wanted Joe Biden to win the election, that's apart from making allegations that really hold no water.
No, and I think this is the real danger for all of us, is that when the institution of media, however we care to define it today, begins to erode, is that two things have happened. We've got people believing that the coronavirus really is no worse than the flu. And we've got people believing that our election system, our democracy, our democratic process is sick. And when you don't believe in those like us that are trying to say, here are the facts, here's what we know, here's what's happened in court, and they don't want to believe it, that almost is an incurable problem now that we've seen that kind of erosion. And to Chastity's point, and it's about the blurred lines, we now have talking heads on prime time on all three cable channels that are posing as news people. But we also in newspapers have something we call analysis that ends up on the front page, which is really a form of an editorial that is blurring the lines as well. So there's this mix between true news and opinion and analysis that isn't helping us either. And we have a circular firing squad now on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, where they're critiquing one another.
It's exactly right. Gary, this is a point I was wanting to ask you about. In the old days, when I picked up the paper, I knew page 5 or page 6, wherever it happened to be, I knew I was looking at opinions. I knew I was looking at op-eds. Online now, it all gets jumbled up. I'm wondering if there's a better way for us, especially in the newspaper world, to distinguish between opinion and news coverage.
Yeah, I think this is an important area, and we've been trying very hard, I know, at the news, and I'm sure at the Free Press too, and other outlets, to make sure that when things go online, they're labeled opinion : or analysis : to differentiate them from other sources, and that's actually embedded in the headline. So when it gets shared on social media, an opinion isn't getting shared as if it's a statement of a fact. So that has been an effort. And I also think, that we ought to remember that I do think that the media has, in general, as we talk about it in these terms, that these 4 years have been good in the sense that I think there's a little more comfort now calling out an untruth as an untruth than there was maybe 4 years ago. And I think that's a positive development, and I think a welcome one. At the same time, I think we have to be careful not to overplay that hand. In other words, a lie has a connotation as something that is deliberately untrue, trying to paint a different picture. And if we call an untruth because someone misspoke a lie, then I think we sort of become the thought police. And I think people will react negatively to us trying to be the thought police. That's not our role.
No, I think we were slow to do that. I think you're exactly right. I've only got about 30 seconds left, but Chastity and Nancy, I wanted to let you both weigh in. Do you feel optimistic or pessimistic for the world of journalism moving ahead? Chastity, you first.
I'm worried because, when you use journalism as the straw man, as the nemesis, then that ends up, we end up seeing things like Charlie Hebdo, right? We end up seeing Jamal Khashoggi. We end up seeing 275 journalists around the world put in jail. I'm worried.
Yeah. And Nancy, you?
I see the chasm continuing to widen. I mean, you have an environment now where people can shop for their own facts, not just opinions, but or interpretation or analysis, but their own facts. And we don't have the resources to do the type of reporting in communities that we used to do, where we covered school board meetings, business openings, and all that stuff that build this trust relationship so that people knew we were reliable. We told you the truth that there was a new sandwich shop opening, so you can believe us. We told you about what's happening in your school board, so you can believe us when we tell you this bigger stuff. And we just simply don't have the resources to do that type of reporting that was normal, I think, when all of us started in the profession. So I'm worried about that.
Yeah, me too. The four of you delivered exactly the kind of conversation I knew you would. Thanks so much for the conversation. Happy New Year to all of you, and we'll talk to you. Hopefully see you all again and soon in person.
Thanks.
We'll take a quick break. Back with more on Flashpoint right after this.
I'm Larry Rocca, your Macomb County Treasurer. I want to help you keep Macomb your home. Are you facing tax foreclosure? Please call or email the office as soon as possible to schedule a video conference. If necessary, you can come to the office on January 21st between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to work on a payment plan to get your taxes back on track. Wishing you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Star Lincoln is celebrating 50 years thanks to you. The Star treatment continues on elevating your personalized luxury experience. Shop in person or online with complimentary remote delivery, because making life effortless is what Star's about. Don't just shop for luxury, experience it at the iconic Star Lincoln in Southfield. Conveniently located 12 Mile and Telegraph. Get the Star treatment at the one and only Star Lincoln in Southfield.
Hi, I'm Kirk Mays, CEO of Forgotten Harvest. We help people every day who struggle with their most basic need, food for themselves and their family. Forgotten Harvest is hard at work, providing assistance to food insecure families in Metro Detroit, particularly those facing hardship due to the COVID-19 crisis. My request to you is simple. We hope to have your support as we continue our work to help those with the most need in our community.
As we headed into 2020, I had a chance to talk with the chief futurist of Ford Motor Company, Cheryl Connolly. I so enjoyed the conversation. I was delighted to see Ford releasing a new outlook on what we expect in society as we move into 2021. Hopefully with the pandemic, a decreasing threat eventually. And I recently talked about it with Cheryl over a Zoom conversation that went like this.
Cheryl, it's been a while since I talked to you, but I have to admit, I believe the last time we spoke, I don't believe as a futurist you told me there was a pandemic coming. What happened to your crystal ball?
Well, truth be told, actually in 2004, a team of people at Ford, including myself, did some future scenarios. And we did talk about an economic collapse brought on by a global pandemic. Now, of course, COVID played out a lot differently than we expected. And that's why we have the 2021 trend report, because there's so much to unpack here about the last year.
In fact, a lot of one of the headlines, I think, of your report would have to be about the anxiety that people are feeling all over the world. I think it was 63% are much more worried about their lives than they were a year ago. This stress load on all of us is enormous.
It is really remarkable. 67% of the people that we spoke to, and that's in 14 different countries, said that watching the daily news was stressful. And what's noteworthy about that is that's a 17% increase from when we asked the question last, just 3 years ago.
How does that end up, what does that end up meaning in the way that we conduct our lives?
Well, overall, when we look across all ages worldwide, people have been surprisingly resilient, but there are some areas to worry about. And I know you're a parent, I'm a parent. It's the youngest generation that seems to be struggling the most. And I'm really talking about, from our survey standpoint, those people are 18 to 23 years of age. 63% of them said that it was harder to adjust to the pandemic than they had imagined. No, it's quite the reverse for baby boomers. 53% say it was easier to adjust. And perhaps it comes down to loneliness, because Generation Z is twice as likely to report daily loneliness or weekly loneliness than baby boomers. So 64% of Gen Z say that they're lonely on a regular basis, and only 34% for baby boomers. Nevertheless, that is still a year-over-year increase for all generations. And I think the youngest people are seeing a change because they're moving closer to or moving in with their family at 50% rate. So it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time for all ages.
In fact, I think the last time you and I spoke, which was before the pandemic, we were talking then about this mass epidemic of loneliness in the world. This is only exacerbating that then, right?
Yes, it was really interesting too, because as your memory is correct, we did spend a lot of time talking about loneliness. And we know that year over year, the numbers have increased across the board. And while it's still the highest for Generation Z, the biggest increase happened at the baby boomer level. So there's angst to go around, if you will. But we also know that people are responding by trying to be more mindful about their mental well-being. 80% of the people we surveyed said that they're trying to do a better job in that space. And so they're turning to meditation or mindfulness apps. In fact, Lincoln offers a partnership with Calm, and they have a free premium membership for Lincoln owners so they can find ways to cope.
The other part of this then is that part of coping, so many people are looking for, the word that you used in your report was an escape of some kind. People are ready to kind of break free of the chains that have been holding us back. We can sort of look ahead now and maybe see light at the end of the tunnel. We know a vaccine is coming. What does that mean then as not just Ford, but every company in the world now tries to figure out our behavior moving forward? Because I think a lot of the habits that we've developed over the last 9 to 10 months are going to stay in place for quite a while.
Particularly on the work front, right? I know you still have to go into work on a daily basis, but many of my colleagues at Ford and myself, we're working remotely because we're not necessarily place dependent. And while I feel like work is harder in many ways and I work longer hours, I ironically feel less rushed. The majority of people we spoke to around the world agree with that. And I feel like time has kind of slowed down, which is odd. It's based kind of on this notion, I feel like I have more time to get stuff done. There's work that's changed. The other area that we know that's changing is how we buy. Retail experience has changed dramatically, with a good number of people saying they don't want to go back to the old ways of retail.
It's interesting then, as you're trying to sell cars to the world, people aren't traveling on vacations the way that we were. People aren't even driving to work every day as commuters, and yet we see this enormous craze right now over some new vehicles, including the Bronco. I've talked a lot about waiting for the electric Mustang to come along. What does that tell us about? I mean, we seem a little confused, don't we?
Well, I think what's happened is that our relationship with automobiles have changed. In fact, 3/4 of the people we spoke to said they couldn't even imagine life without their own personal vehicle. And maybe we're not driving or commuting to work on a regular basis, but we are doing different things with our vehicle. So for instance, 1 in 5 say that they turn to their automobile for privacy. 1 in 4 use it as a place to relax. 1 in 3 say they go to their vehicle just to decompress or be alone. And my favorite stat is that 7% say that they use their automobile as a place to hide.
So never has the Ford Escape been more appropriately named.
Exactly. And then to your point, though, the portfolio, there's good reason to be excited. You've got the electric F-150, the Bronco. I know your family's waiting on theirs to be produced. My family's counting down the days. I think we'll be waiting a little bit. But it's exciting to see all the energy. And specifically the Mach-E, the all-electric Mustang Mach-E is going to be really helpful in the sustainability front, which the world needs, because COVID, one of the surprising things about COVID is it's been detrimental to the environment. I mean, Indeed, we saw cleaner air in the early days, brighter skies, but sustaining sustainability throughout the pandemic has been very difficult, particularly as people are relying more on disposable goods and plastics.
Cheryl, I've told you before, I think you have one of the most fascinating jobs on the planet. I really always enjoy talking to you. And thanks so much for the time. It's been great.
Thank you. Take care. Happy holidays.
We will link to the new Ford report, by the way, on our website at clickondetroit.com/flashpoint. Back with more in just a minute.
Your sleepless nights are over. Right now at Gardner White, choose your comfort and choose your brand at a price that is right for you. Save on Sealy, Serta Perfect Sleeper, and Beauty Rest at just $9.99. Plus a free box spring, free TV, and free same-day delivery. Buy it today and sleep on it tonight. Plus get 0% financing up to 72 months. With Detroit's largest selection of top-name brand mattresses, you'll find your perfect sleep. The after Christmas sale at Gardner White, Detroit's #1 mattress store.
Another day, another chance to bounce forward.
Let's do this!
By making your internet speeds fast and reliable, so you can keep up with your customers. By ensuring those speeds have wireless internet backup. So if the power goes down, your connection doesn't. And by covering all your connected devices with serious security. So we can handle this and this, while you get on with this and this. Be fast, be secure, bounce forward with Comcast Business. Get started with a powerful internet and voice solution for a great price when you buy both. Call or go online today.
Michigan, it's time for double the fun because DraftKings Sportsbook and Casino are coming to the Great Lakes State. Sign up early and get $100 towards blackjack and $100 towards any sports bet for free. As the #1 sportsbook and casino apps in the country, we've paid up north of $20 billion in payouts already. Sign up now because this offer won't last. Just download the apps, sign up with the promo code, get your $200 bonus, and make it rain.
Coronavirus cases are spiking in Michigan. Local 4 is committed to making sure you have the very latest information.
We are heading into the holidays with a high baseline.
Dr. McGeorge and the Good Health team are here with facts. Don't miss our daily updates on Local 4 News and Click on Detroit.
That's going to do it for us today, but a quick invitation to be with us next week for our annual Look Ahead, Look Back edition of Flashpoint as we head into 2021. Thanks so much for being here. Meet the Press is next. Happy New Year. We'll see you next time on Flashpoint.